amazing to see so many different people from all around the world. So I think we can go ahead and start. Go ahead, Sarosh. I think people will come in as they come, but welcome everyone.
Welcome everyone. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome yet to another inspiring country profile webinar hosted by the Snow Leopard Network. To the date, we have heard from numerous country programs and their conservation efforts. There seems to be several thematic areas that are transpiring from these conversations. These themes range from community-based conservation to eco-livelihood development, such as promoting tourism efforts, to developing a governance understanding of the snow leopard ecology and their current and future status. I have to admit that ever since my first webinar, I have been in constant conversation with the SLN to identify commonalities and align methodologies where feasible. Today, we have yet another exciting and unique update from the country whose inhabitants regard the snow leopard as a secret animal and guardian of its warriors. The snow leopard is the symbol of its capital and the pride of its people. They are the leaders in the snow leopard conservation on the political stage. They have hosted the first ever snow leopard forum. It is none other than Kyrgyz Republic. Would you please welcome our guest speakers, Mr. Zairbek Kobanbekova, Mr. Rahim Kolonbekova, Ms. Kinji Sultanbayov, and Ms. Tanya Rosen from Elbers Foundation. Zairbek is the director of Elbers Foundation. He has been active in supporting the establishment of the very first community-based conservancy in Kyrgyzstan, as well as working with Kyrgyz customs services to train wildlife detection dogs. Sorry about that. Rahim is a wildlife biologist and a key team member who led the first snow leopard telemetry project in Kyrgyzstan. He is currently leading the snow leopard and pre-survey under the UNEP Vanishing Treasures project in Kyrgyzstan. Kenji is a former English teacher turned conservationist, is currently working as a program manager, leading and supporting all the communications and environmental outreach programs. Tanya Rosen, no stranger to us, is a technical advisor to UNEP Vanishing Treasure project in Kyrgyzstan and conservation advisor with Caucasus Nature Foundation. She worked as a director of Snow Leopard program in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan for Pantara. She is also co-founder of Elbers Foundation and a member of the IUCN Cat Specialist Group and CMI Snow Leopard Focal Point. Would you please join me thanking our guest speakers? And before I hand over the floor to our speakers, I'd like to remind you all of some housekeeping rules and presentation structures. We will record this session, which is most important. We will you can ask questions during the talk and the chat, and I will try my best to get them after the talks. The guests will present for 30 to 35 minutes, and after that, for 20 minutes, we will have discussion and question and answer sessions. The structure of the presentation is as such. Tanya will introduce the project and pass it on to Rahim, who will talk about the monitoring, and then back to Tanya, who will briefly discuss the activities such as botanical work and also socioeconomic activities. And Kenji will talk about the impact of COVID on the project overall. And at the end, Zairbekova will discuss the new initiatives, at least from my perspective, new initiatives of the wildlife detection through the dogs. Without any further ado, I invite our guest speakers to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarge, for this wonderful introduction, and thank you to the Snow Leopard Network for giving us a chance to introduce and discuss a bit about the work that we are doing in, actually that specifically the Elbers Foundation is doing in Kyrgyzstan. So as Soros mentioned, I'll start off by talking to you about a project that maybe some of you are familiar with. It's called the Vanishing Treasures Project, supported by the government of Luxembourg and implemented through the UN Environment Program, the goal of which is to understand the impacts of climate change on snow leopards and other wildlife, and likely prey, and the impacts also on not just the wildlife, but also on the communities that share these amazing landscapes with the snow leopards and their prey. As probably you know, climate change is having tremendous impacts on wildlife. And when we try to understand what are the impacts of climate change on snow leopards, it's really important to key on what are the impacts on the prey, and in the form of change of temperature, precipitation, extreme events, and snow cover, as well as the change of vegetation composition and productivity that impacts the life cycle of plants that are very important to the prey, and especially at times when the prey is more vulnerable. For example, you know, in the spring, in the late spring during kidding time, when important plants are important for the young kids to survive. And finally, there is also the issue of water availability. At the moment, with the glaciers melting, there could be like a short moment of large water availability, but that eventually will dry out, leaving the wildlife and deprived of it, as well as the communities and the livestock that depend on it. And when we look at climate change, it has to be seen together with other elements and other threats that become even more important and as increasingly and stressing the wildlife populations. And one is the increasing numbers of livestock that are expanding into snow leopard and snow leopard prey habitat. The other is the issue of human-wildlife conflict. You know, with more livestock occupying more of the habitat of the snow leopard prey, the two come into contact, the prey and the livestock, and bringing snow leopards into increasing also contact with the livestock and the communities that herd the livestock. And then, of course, there is the issue of poaching on the snow leopards, but also poaching of the prey. And altogether, when you know, the climate change and all these other threats that have already existed become of even greater significance and greater threat to snow leopards and wildlife populations. So what we as projects are going to try to achieve. So first of all, you know, we're conducting together with our partners, the Snow Leopard Trust, Humboldt University, and URAC, important research on the snow leopards and the prey species, the vegetation and the land use. We're also looking at trying to understand what are going to be the changes and the vulnerabilities under the different projected climate change scenarios. And then based on that, we're trying to figure out what could be the different climate adaptation options for conserving the snow leopards, and ensuring coexistence between people and snow leopards. And finally, you know, solutions that can also work for communities that depend on these snow leopard landscapes for their very own survival. I'm going to pass on the microphone to Rahim, who will specifically now discuss about what is the snow leopard monitoring piece of the project that so far we've been able to carry out. So Rahim, you have the word.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Rahim Kulendekov, field biologist of Elbrus Foundation. From 2015 to 2019, I worked on the project to install radio collars for snow leopards and wolves in one of the most hard to reach and harsh weather places in Kyrgyzstan, in Sarıçay Nature Reserve. So you can see the incredible landscape of that reserve on the picture. So since 2020, within the framework of the UNEP Vanishing Treasures project, our team began work on installing camera traps to study snow leopard. One of our priorities is to identify habitats. What altitudes live snow leopards at to know the number of snow leopards in the project area. Then you can extrapolate the data to other areas of Kyrgyzstan and get an average figure for the country. Because while choosing locations in the project area for installation of camera traps, almost all landscapes that exist in the country were taken into account. Next slide, please. In the summer of 2020, we were able to conduct a series of virtual meetings with various experts where it was decided to use the protocol of the population assessment of the world snow leopards, called PAUS, of the Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Conservation Program, GSLEC, in estimating the number of snow leopards using camera traps. So, previous slide. It's known the PAUS process will create the world first accurate estimate of the snow leopard numbers in the world, which will help inform important conservation and strategic actions. In addition to this PAUS process, has 5 additional outcomes. It will create the most robust map of snow leopard distribution and a spatial map of the threats faced by the species in different areas of its range. Identify the most important areas of population and biodiversity in need of greater protection. Build the capacity of young conservationists, rangers, and members of local community, and identify potential refuges for snow leopards in response to climate change. Further, using the microdesign guideline as part of the Kyrgyzstan area, the Chonkemin State Nature Park that you see there on the picture, and Shumkartor CBC Community-Based Conservancy, Kyrgyzstan and Susamir Valley were identified and sampling tables were drawn to assess the snow leopard distribution in the project area. In 2020, due to the COVID-19 situation, as well as severe weather conditions, it was possible to install camera traps only on the territories of Chonkemin State Nature Park and Shumkartor Community-Based Conservancy, together with rangers of the Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Protected Areas of State Agency for Environmental Protection and Forestry, and the employees of the Chonkemin State Nature Park. So based on the terrain, the area of the territory, the presence of prey base, illegal hunting, and other factors, we expected that our camera traps would catch 3 or 4 individuals of snow leopards. So in next year, in the spring 2021, when the camera traps were assembled, the leopards were captured on 6 camera traps. But given that there were no repeated entries, so it's difficult to say whether the snow leopards use the area on a permanent basis or they visit just once. So it's most likely there is possibility to install the camera traps on the area of Chonkemin again. So for this year, it's planned to install from 80 to 100 camera traps in the project area. 20 of them were installed in Tohtovul district months ago. So for now, we are waiting for good data from the study area, and we'll happy to share the results. Yeah, that's the short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahim. So in addition to the snow leopard monitoring, we have also, actually, we are currently conducting other types of survey that are focusing, well, we conducted the survey of the ungulate population, of the, one of the key preys for snow leopards in the project area, and that happened last fall, when we plan to conduct a repeat survey later this year. And then currently we're conducting vegetation and also habitat suitability surveys that will then contribute to analysis that will also rely on the surveys done on the ground, but also on satellite images that will be collected in the process. And we will also, try to understand what are the sort of patterns of climate-driven changes that are impacting the pasture quality and productivity, and also identify the changes in the composition of the vegetation and their phenology, and then we'll do surveys to understand where across the project site the herder camps are located and how intensively they are used, and then combined we'll analyze the impact of all of that on the snow leopards and the prey, which relies intensely on this habitat. Finally, we have also conducted socioeconomic surveys starting last year, and they are ongoing to understand what is the background of the different people and communities that live in the project site, and to see how much livestock they have, what their interactions are. What their interactions are with wildlife and conflict, and then what their perceptions are about climate change and how they see their lives impacted. And of course, one issue that also came up in the surveys was how people were impacted also by the pandemic, which has affected the economy of the communities, especially those more reliant on income, for example, from hunting and tourism. So now I'll pass the word to Kenje, who will tell more about the conservation under COVID situation.
Hello to everyone. Thanks to SLN for giving us such a chance to talk to you guys, and then it's nice to see our colleagues all around the world. So I hope you are all are safe at this moment from COVID, but my topic is about COVID and COVID impacts on the conservations, and hope you and your family are safe. So since last March, when the government declared a state of emergency due to COVID-19, Kyrgyzstan has been implementing counter-epidemic restrictions. Anti-epidemic measures were organized everywhere in the country, from rural areas to urban areas. Many organizations had to work remotely. Ilbir's Foundation carried out its activities online as well, such as conducting several virtual meetings and workshops while preparing for the Vanishing Treasures project. However, some planned activities like visiting villages and rural homes in the mountain pastures to interview local organization representatives and herders were postponed until September, when the situation got better. Then postponing activities caused some difficulties in locating the interviewees, because by September, many herders are returning to villages from their pastures so that their children can go to school. By autumn, we were overloaded with these postponed activities and had to consult with the grant administration to change some dates. As you see on the map, Leopard collaborates with 6 community-based conservancies, including 2 new CBCs formed after the COVID. They are Shunkartur CBC in Chongkemin, Jamatsök and Karakujur in Naryn region, Chunkurtur in Isikul region, Jamat Janaydar CBC in Alay of Osh region, Jamat Bektosot, Jamat Mingteke CBCs in Chongalai of Osh region, and 2 new CBCs has been formed after COVID. So those new CBCs are Akbulung Micro Reserve and Karakujur. Akbulung Micro Reserve on the southern shore of Isikul Lake to conserve birds of the area, and Karakujur CBC prompted by the initiatives of the local community to conserve wildlife of their region. In June and July of the last year, people all around Kyrgyzstan suffered from COVID-19 massively. Our local CBCs supported local hospitals by providing needed equipment and medications. As you see from the map, our partner CBCs are in more rural areas, which are subject to fewer restrictions, so they are able to continue most activities like they do normally. Rangers on site noted that poaching increased during lockdown because many people were not allowed to go to their districts and stayed at homes without work. Many had more time to go hunting, and they were more vulnerable economically, so they had more incentive to poach. COVID-19 has changed city culture in some ways. Bikes have become a more popular form of transportation, and some birds and animals have returned to the cities. Active rest is being valued more, so people are going out to the mountains and internal tourism is growing. Our CBCs have worked on post-COVID-19 restoration and keep consulting with Ilbir's Foundation staff on their plan for development. Jamat and Janaydar and Bektosot CBCs have been granted hunting concessions of 300,000 hectares of area for 15 years by the state agencies for environmental protection and forestry. All the CBCs are very much interested in developing eco and agrotourism in their areas at the moment, and we continue to support them in developing new ideas. Shunkartur CBC was funded to implement JEF project on developing ecotourism by building a wild animal watching platform and introducing tours on wildlife watching and beekeeping. In 4 CBCs, we have set up hiking and horse riding tours, and they are about to start it very soon. We are trying to involve local rangers who love the land and want to maintain nature reserves for their next generation. Overall, COVID-19 gave us the push to realize the importance of local collaboration in conserving wildlife and nature. So that's it.
Thank you so much. So now the word goes to Zaire, who's gonna be concluding with the presentation on the work with the wildlife detection dogs.
You. Hello, Zahir, we can't hear you.
I'm here. Sorry. Today I will tell you about sniffing dogs, implementation within the framework of the Memorandum of Understanding of the Securing the Borders project under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. The Securing Borders project is the first in Kyrgyzstan to use service dogs to combat illegal trade in wild fauna and flora species, and therefore reinforce its support of the conventions on international trade in endangered species of wild fauna and flora in 2016. This service dogs project was implemented in partnership with the State Customs Service of the Kyrgyz Republic and Pantera, Working Dog for Conservation, and Invest Foundation. As part of this project, kinologists, dog trainers, and their service 9 dogs went through several trainings with an instructor from Working Dog Conservation from US, so to detect and research for snow leopard, argali, ibex, saiga, and falcon derivatives. And as you can see on the slide, these trainings took place in special facilities, warehouses, at the airports, and border posts. Furthermore, as part of the project, areas for 2 dogs, areas for two dogs were built as a border checkpoints, and it's on the border with Tajikistan, and the similar area as a Torohat checkpoints on the border with China. And the dogs are currently working at the border checkpoints, the airports, and their works is already showing good result. The horns were apprehended with trained dogs at the border with Tajikistan and were handed over to the law enforcement for services. Next slide. After completion of the project, we started a new project with Pantera building international capacity and transnational network to build cat trafficking. The goal of the project is to support the state environmental and climate committee in combating illegal wildlife trafficking. For this project, a project area has been selected. The territory of 2 regions in Maren and Isikur, where all works is carried out of the time being. Before starting the project, we organized a number of trainings and seminars on wildlife trafficking at the global and regional level, and to review new legislation in the Kyrgyz Republic, the definition of the species and derivatives and documentation. How to interview suspects, offenders, and records data on employer security. Here we have focused on improving the efficiency of environmental posts, as you see on the slides, which show of the environmental post with the technical equipment. Online cameras and solar panels have been installed. I always dreamed after the border security, the project that the state environmental agency would have its own service dogs, because this use of service dogs in conservation is so effective. And this dream has been implemented through this project. We bought 2 working dogs and presented them to the State Committee on Ecology and Climate Change. Special areas were built for them, one of which was financed by Working Dog for Conservation. Since August 2019, our staff members have been on duty with state rangers at eco posts and patrolling the areas. All cars and numbers and that pass through this eco post are registered and introduced the smart profile database. You can see the license numbers of the cars, Next slide, please. All the cars, the names of people, the dates, the time they pass through.
Sorry to disturb you, Zair, Beck. We have got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. We got some very interesting data. For example, in Chararcha had 6,000 cars pass through the over only 4.5 months. In Kosovo for 13 months for 6,000 cars through the post. Then we do data analysis and identify potential poachers, the connection between them and other poachers, ordinary residents, how often they pass through, and investigate other relevant information. The results are then provided to State Committee on Environmental and Climate for the action. Overall, I think that's a small contributors we are making. We're helping to combat poaching and snow leopards population decline. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. And this is a very interesting one. This was a very interesting presentation from all perspectives. It seems that, again, we observed that there are the COVID pandemic had a number of negative impacts on the projects, but at the same time, it has provided opportunities for the project that we may not have realized that if the pandemic didn't occur. The shift in change in the project implementation has shown through this presentation that has been quite effective, especially with involving local communities, and a new initiative involving dogs and identifying poachers or products that are being illegally transported. Thank you very much for this presentation. We have got a couple of questions on the chat, which is very interesting. Bilal would like to know if you use a specific breed of dogs to do this type of work, such as German Shepherds or any other specifics, or if you could shed some light to that, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, usually we use Malinois, Malinois and German Sheep. And usually before we will discuss with dog trainers from state, custom state service. And then they can say, yes, it's good dogs and not good dogs. And then we will choose.
Following on that question, Shireen, one of the participants, would like to know how much the dogs cost. Is there any specific need to keep the dogs?
Usually it's about 2,000 and before $5,000. But this time for 2 dogs, we pay very small money because our friends present these dogs.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope that the answers suffices to our audiences. Thank you very much for that. Justine would like to know, why do you think there was a few captures of snow leopard in the VT landscape? Do you have any hypothesis on that?
Rahim asked me to answer on our, on his behalf. And yes, I mean, one guess is that as the team was conducting the camera trap survey, it had already observed, and actually in the prey survey as well, it observed that actually there was not as much prey observed as expected, and there have been lots of signs of poaching detected. In fact, while collecting the cameras, the team actually ran into a poacher. So it's very possible that because of limited prey base, that this area is not as heavily used by snow leopards, and so as a result, the density is very, very low. But this is just a hypothesis, of course.
Yeah, if there are any questions that you'd like to ask rather than typing on a chat, please feel free to put your hand up and ask your questions directly from the presenters. Staying with the dogs, it's a very interesting, it's a niche initiatives from our perspective, is that ideally how many dogs are required to upscale the efforts, and would you be able to cover and how many dogs are required to cover all the border stations for this type of a project? Do you have any estimation for that?
For Kyrgyzstan, I know because I discussed when last time about 40 dogs we need for border. I mean, because one dog cannot work every time, all time, and they must change after 1 week and 2 weeks. But unfortunately, our government cannot understand why dogs very important for border.
Thank you.
We have now about 24, I mean, in customs service, but they need more.
Mirza has a question. I'll pass on the mic to Mirza. We're still staying with the dogs research, the dog work that you do at the moment. So I'll pass on the mic to Mirza. Mirza, would you mind asking the question directly? Thank you. Mirza.
Yes, sure. So I was just Googling about the, well, in terms of maybe not political situation, but in social, in many aspects, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan is basically have similar conditions. And based on the Anti-Corruption Research Center transparency, Kyrgyzstan has a position of 124 out of 180 in terms. Do you believe that under this condition, dogs will help stop or reduce illegal trafficking? Zeybek?
Tanya?
What do you want me to?
Yes, either yourself or Zahir Bek.
Well, corruption is a huge issue, and I don't know. I think I don't know if you remember, because I'm not sure whether you had already joined ANCOT at that time, but a few years ago there was this huge seizure of illegal trophies that came from Tajikistan, and and came through Kyrgyzstan with the idea of being then sent home to hunters in Europe, mostly in Europe. And the dogs, and despite the fact that the driver and one of the hunting guides in the vehicle crossing the border was trying hard to bribe the border officers and the customs officers, the dogs had detected the wildlife, the ibex and Marco Polo sheep horns, and the handlers refused to be bribed. And so I think a lot has to do with who you are working with and who you are training, and so you need to have trust in the people you are working with, because the dogs are going to do the work. They're going to detect the wildlife the illegal wildlife, legally traded wildlife, but then it's a matter of what the people are going to do with that information. And so key is to work with people that you can trust and that have the courage to also expose people along the chain who may try to hide the information or bury the whole the illegal these events. And in that there is still definitely a lot of problems. I mean, there's really good people who don't want to be bribed and really try hard to do their work, but there's also a lot of problematic people still.
Thank you very much.
Want to add something?
Gustav, would you mind asking your question directly? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone for great presentations. And I was wondering about climate change in general. And I know, I mean, we all know there's lots of evidence in Central Asia of climate change, but I was wondering specifically about Kyrgyzstan and if you see things like shorter winters, shrinking glaciers, changing in precipitation patterns and temperatures. Just interested in general, what evidence are there? Thanks.
Tanya, would you mind? Thank you.
Yes, so we've been working with an expert from Hydromet, Zoya, who's not here with us today, and who has been tracking all the changes in temperature across many years. The data set available is quite large. And in discussions with her, what has emerged is that what's really troubling is this increasing happening of these extreme events, which translate into this, more than usual, more than normal, like very hot summers that then triggered this landslides and flash floods, and then this springs, this sort of wetter springs that also results into a lot of avalanche events. And that has already impacted a lot of the communities in snow leopard habitat, because in places where normally the winters would be intended to have some snow and obviously also some very cold temperatures, but there have been like this sort of weather situations where they have resulted in a lot more snowfall and avalanches that have then killed a lot of the livestock. And so, yes, that's all attributed to the way climate change is impacting these environments.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we move on to the impact of COVID? So we stick with the climate change. If there are any questions with regard to climate change, if not, I have a question to ask. So I'll wait for the audiences to see if there is any other questions with regards to climate change. I guess not. We are doing a similar work with regards to climate change and trying to figure out what is the impact of climate change on the mid-century, at the end of century, with regards to the snow leopard habitat and also the entire Amur-Pines River basin. Taking that into consideration, how do you plan to use the result of your modeling and the policies and education? And with that in mind, is this expected action during this project time, or is it to happen in the future? And who will implement it and how? Sorry, there are a number of questions behind each other because it's very close to what we do at the moment as well. It's good to learn from your experiences and your plans as well. Thank you.
Yes, so the project has some very ambitious goals, and the idea is to, based on the information that we have collected so far on the communities, the snow leopard and the prey. The idea is to come up with a series of conservation intervention that might minimize and buffer the impact of climate change. And so that actually, we have like prepared a table of that outlines what these interventions are. Some are very simple and practical, and something that you also do in Afghanistan, which is, predator-proof corrals in areas where we, through communication with local communities, we see that there are some hotspots of conflict, and so with the corrals then serving the purpose of protecting the livestock from attacks. And then the other one is that of actually creating grazing exclusion areas as a way of minimizing the risk of, first of all, minimizing the risk of disturbance to the snow leopard prey and the snow leopards, of course, but also as a way of also minimizing the risk of transmission of diseases that could be fatal to the snow leopard prey. Because obviously, especially with climate change, and obviously there's a lot of still research happening, but one of the hypotheses is that there could be now in the future, greater outbreaks of disease transmitted from domestic to wild populations that could be very deadly for the snow leopard prey, and then indirectly for the snow leopards as well.
Thank you so much, Tanya. We're moving on to the impacts of COVID. Ranjina, would you mind asking a question directly to the presenters? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Suresh. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. I was just wondering how COVID has impacted threats in the landscape. Has it perhaps increased poaching, or have there been other ways that it might have impacted the threats to snow leopard and its prey species?
So as I have mentioned, Ranjini, in my presentation, when we talk to the rangers, with our local rangers, they have mentioned that during the COVID lockdown, the number of poachers has increased, but actually there is no statistics that how much it has been decreased. But it was mentioned because, as I have mentioned earlier, that we assume that many people stayed jobless. Yes, they had more time, and then it forced them maybe to hunt. It is not because of their financial issues, just it was for entertaining purposes, like as a hobby, Yes. Yes, based on the ranger's note.
Okay, thanks, Kenny.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bilal has a question with regards to the government and governance structure. Bilal, would you mind asking that question directly, please? Thank you.
So hello everyone. My question is that is there any transnational collaboration between the governments, with other countries by which the country shares its borders?
Tanya?
There is one on GSLab, yes, in the framework of the GSLab projects, right? Yeah, Tanya.
Yes, yeah, we have GSLAP as the framework for that collaboration, and under UNDP there have also been there is one initiative which I think is still pending of collaboration, like a memorandum of understanding between Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. But I think that because of COVID, and then obviously also most recently with the sort of political situation, tense situation, may not have been signed yet.
Thank you very much. I see Gustav's hands up at the moment. Gustav, do you have questions to our presenters or comments? Please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. And sorry, more than a question, it's almost a few additional responses to what our team has said. So yeah, I almost feel part of this team who made this wonderful series of presentations, and congratulations, Tanya, Zair, Kenje, and Rahim. Very nice presentations. So I just wanted to add a few points which I think were raised, and very valid points. At one point, I believe Bilal asked if the cameras were set in a small area with high density or in a large area with small density. So Bilal, as Tanya mentioned in the chat, the way the cameras have been set up is it seeks a balance between the two. You don't need to sample too small an area and end up with sampling a very small number of individuals very intensively. You don't want to set up in too big an area and make the density of cameras so rarefied that you end up having one or each snow leopard to have only one camera in its distribution range. So there's a balance that is sought. And there are some fascinating and very easy to use tools that you can find on the globalsnowleopard.org website under the resource section. So that's one. A couple of you asked about the transboundary cooperation. So Tanya rightly mentioned there is a pending MOU between the 4 countries, which is Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. It has been approved from various ministries across all the countries. And I think at this point in time, based on our discussion with all the 4 countries, it's only pending a formal meeting to just share the endorsed documents. There's also an action plan which is there. But more interestingly, and that's pertaining to this particular landscape which Zair and his team spoke about, just to the north of it, there is a landscape which is a GSLEP landscape under Kazakhstan. It's Kazakhstan's southern GSLEP landscape that they have identified as one of the priority areas for conservation. And we have initiated conversation with them. There is an organization which is already doing camera trapping in that part. And we suspect that some of the snow leopards that our friends Zair and the team and Rahim and all their team have photographed here could also be photographed on the other side of the border. So it will be fascinating to initiate some information sharing, especially along these 2 adjacent landscapes, and see how much of movement does take place between these 2 areas, if at all. Yeah. So and lastly, one last point someone mentioned, which was about how does all this information go forward? And Tanya gave a very clear answer that there are these pilot interventions which will be tried and implemented in a few of the communities where ILBERS and other organizations are working. But in the larger scheme of things, there is a plan within the project to implement what they call as a climate smart management plan, to develop one. And this climate smart management plan follows the guidelines that were developed over the last 5-6 years under the GSLEP program through a team of several international and national and regional experts. And the hope is that all this information will feed into the management plan, and ultimately that management plan will become a project document which can then be used to raise resources internally or through external funding sources to ensure this entire 15,000 square kilometer area, which does have not a very high snow leopard density, but a variable density of snow leopards. Some areas may have very low density that Rahim just mentioned with only 6 encounters. Some areas might have moderate density, which is the central part of the landscape where another team has got almost 100 encounters of snow leopards. But the idea is that once that's done, then there could be a management plan which can then be implemented across this 15,000 square kilometers. So thank you. I just wanted to add to a few very interesting points that were raised by this wonderful audience. And again, kudos to the whole team for this brilliant presentation.
Thank you very much, Christo, for your insight. As always, much appreciated. And also thank you very much for the additional inputs. Really appreciate it. Is there any other questions from our audience to our speakers before we close the session? Thank you. I guess not. With that in mind, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, the Elbers team, for their wonderful work and the work that they have been conducting so far in the region, especially in Kyrgyzstan. And the wonderful initiative, first in its kind, if may I say so, personally, with regards to using dogs as a detection tools for poaching. I think it would be interesting to see a paper out of this, and maybe further countries that are working with regards to climate change can open dialogue between each other and start discussing how the result of their projects and programs with regards to identifying impacts of climate change on snow leopard habitat to develop a comprehensive and coherent management plans in the area, and also policy papers with regards to influencing the decision makers with regards to conservation of snow leopard in the snow leopard habitat home ranges. So with that in mind, I thank again all our guest speakers to this, and we look forward to hearing more about their projects once it is completed and moved from pilot stage to a full implementation, especially the dog initiatives, and also with regards to their climate change project. Please put your hands together to thank our presentations once more to the wonderful presentation. And we look forward to seeing you all joining us on the 27th of July 2021 to listen to a very interesting webinar, Birds in Snow Leopard Habitat, which is going to be a very interesting. I mean, I'm not a bird specialist, but I do enjoy listening to their sounds and waking up to their wonderful songs. So with that in mind, we look forward to hosting you all and having you all in our next webinar. Thank you very much, and I wish you guys a farewell and a nice weekend.